Hello everyone, good morning, still good afternoon now. I'm Jo Gallitcher, I'm the Content Director at REBA, and I'm really excited to be hosting the next session, which is on Future Benefits 2030, Adapting to Evolving Employee Needs and Preparing for the Next Generation of the Workforce. I'm just going to move this down a little bit, there we go. So as we all know, the future of work is rapidly evolving, driven by technological advancements, remote work, flexibility, changing societal values, and employers face a significant shift in the needs and expectations of tomorrow's workforce. Today's panel, who I'll introduce you to in just a second, will explore how employee benefits is evolving and what employers can do to develop the total rewards proposition to align with the changing needs of an increasingly diverse workforce. Now, before I get our panel to introduce ourselves, as always at REBA events, we have a Slido poll to get a temperature check for our audience. So if you can just scan that QR code to get involved, and it's the same QR code on the poll, so we're good to go. What is the biggest challenge your organisation faces when adapting benefits to a changing workforce? So we have budget constraints, meeting diverse employee needs, educating employees about the benefits available to them, keeping up with tech and new benefits platforms, and ensuring benefits align with company culture and values. Now, I think it's a bit obvious which is going first. We'll have to keep track of money and budget constraints and expanding benefits offerings massively taking over as the biggest challenge, followed by the education piece about benefits available to employees. Thank you very much. We'll just leave that poll open for just a little bit longer so we can see if it moves about at all. Now, onto our lovely panel. If I could ask you all to, there is, I think, just one, there's two mics, okay, perfect. To please introduce yourself, your company, and how changing workforce demographics are driving change in employee benefits at your organisation. We'll start with you, Michele.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Michele. I'm heading up customer experience and growth for Zurich Integrated Benefits. So we offer benefits in the form of protection and pension solutions on both on international as well as domestic level, serving roughly 6.5 million employees across the globe at the moment. We've actually embarked on a journey which was an interesting piece of work of really with the future laboratory, so envisioning what employee benefits might look like in 2030. So it's clearly many factors, and I think we'll come to speak about many of them. If I would look at demographic workforce changes in particular, I think I see two core impacts on benefits. I think, first of all, the workforce is more diverse than ever before. We see Gen Z entering the workforce. At the same time, we have baby boomers working longer as life expectancy and health are increasing. So it's actually for the first time in history that we have 5 generations in the workforce. But it's not only, I think, about generations. I think we really see the diversity is more gender equality in the workforce, more racial diversity, more diverse work patterns, more part-time, more hybrid work, more different lifestyles. So I truly think the traditional model of benefits is not really making this justice anymore, and we need to move to a more human-centric approach to find new ways to address these diverse needs and be meaningful to the workforce. I think the second one I see is that we see many economies already struggling with labor and skill shortages. So I think that increases the importance of benefits in the war for talent. And I think we see that happening where employees say that they're much more likely to join an employer because of benefits, actually 25% more likely than 10 years ago. And on the other hand, also that 20% of employees would actually switch their job for better benefits if salary would be similar. So I think it's increased role of benefits and more diverse needs to address.
Perfect, thank you. Morag.
Morning, everybody. I'm Morag. Until very recently, I had the great privilege of working with Unilever as their lead in the future of work, the global lead in the future of work, where I led some of the innovations that we did at Unilever, including a new employment model called U-Work, thinking about longevity and ageing demographics. And now I'm very excited to be stepping out there and starting to help other organisations to think about their future of work strategies and how they bring those to life. I think my perspective would be, perhaps it's not how generations or different generations are thinking differently about benefits, but perhaps it's about how we should think differently about what we're offering people. And should we think more broadly about what is a benefit? And I think Michele was alluding to this, the relationship is changing between individuals and the organisations that they work for, and what they want from organisations is different. So we need to stop thinking about, and I think we're doing it in many cases, thinking about boxes and FTEs and a transactional relationship where it's about salary and a list of rewards, and thinking about mutual benefit. How do we create mutually beneficial relationships? What is it that people are really valuing from the organisations that they work with? So an example might be, if we think about those who are new to their careers or early stages of their careers, there's quite a lot of job hopping, and that's not a new thing, that's not a new trend. But if we think about why are people doing that, very often it will be around, I want to acquire new skills, I want to gain new experiences, and I want to get more income. So if we as employers and organisations think about how can we offer some of that stuff so that people aren't job hopping. Now, some level of attrition is obviously healthy and good, but it helps us to think of it differently. And I know a number of you in this audience are reward managers, reward directors, thinking, but that's not the role that I have. But I think it's about how do we make sure we're integrated within an organisation so that what we're offering employees is really of value and what they want.
Okay.
Fantastic. My name's Kate Whelan. I'm the reward lead at Dentsu International. Dentsu, and I lead a team of global reward professionals that look after compensation, benefits, recognition, well-being. It's not as broad as Isha's. I'm very envious. But I think in terms of the organisation, not everyone has heard of it. We're a large multimedia organisation, about 70,000 people globally, across numerous countries. The way we work is we work with other organisations to help support them and to transform and grow their businesses. And in doing so, it's all about understanding people. So within us and within Reward, within the organisation ourselves, our focus is all really around understanding our people and what motivates them, what inspires them, what's going to attract them. So when we think about benefits, it is exactly the same kind of thinking going on. If I think just answer your question very quickly around sort of preparing for the future. I genuinely struggle to understand. So, we're in HR. We don't like biased. We don't like to pigeonhole people. So the moment we start talking about generational differences, we've immediately sort of stuck a label on things. And when we think about our benefits, and I love the trend of personalisation because it encourages you to talk about the person and the reason why they are selecting things. So a lot of our focus is around on accessibility and inclusivity, but in terms of not necessarily the benefit that you're offering, in terms of the way that you're communicating and acknowledging that the end point might be exactly the same, but the reasons why people reach that end point, whether it's flexible working or additional leave or whatever the benefit might be, is very different, and it matches the life stage that they're at or the point they're at.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Isha Smith. I'm the Global VP of Total Rewards for Soundcloud. Soundcloud is a music and tech mixed business, so we call ourselves the place where creators and fans can come and connect through music and share their music. So unless my friends from Apple Music are in the room, and they might tell you they've got the biggest library of music, not true. SoundCloud has music from all of the big sort of music people you might think of, all your pop artists and rock legends and all of those, but we also have music from emerging creators. So that does make us officially, and the Guinness Book of World Records has confirmed this a couple of years ago, but we've got the biggest music collection in the world. Our challenges, and I'm going to answer Joe's question kind of tied to that. Our challenges are that we're competing in a space where we're trying to get talent from tech businesses. So some of our talent has come from the likes of Amazon, Google, Meta, but we're also competing in the music world as well. And it's finding the balance, because reward and benefits are very different in those two worlds. You know, the tech world, as we all know, is sort of often referred to as a gold standard of benefits, but at the same time, we need to fulfill the music side of things as well, against the constraints of us being a small business. So we're 400 employees spread across London, Berlin, and the US. We're VC funded. So answerable to our VC investors for every dollar that we spend, trying to break through. We made profit for the first time last year. So those are big, bulky challenges. And pulling it back to the world of benefits and what rewards might mean, for us, it's been about looking inwards. What does reward mean at SoundCloud, rather than what would reward mean for an organization who's trying to compete with tech and with music? So we've taken a broader approach to that. Kate mentioned earlier, my role is quite broad. So it looks at compensation, reward, performance, learning and development, and employee engagement as well. And it is that weaving together of all those worlds to see what is the deal that we can offer that supplements just the salary. And alluding to everything else that my fellow panelists have covered about the changing and evolving world of benefits, we've got a very young force. The average SoundClouder is 33 years old. What can we do to make them stay at an organization that is lean? Therefore, how can we create more career advancement opportunities internally and leverage every single thing that we have at our disposal?
Thank you, Isha. As you can hear, we've got a fantastic panel, so please do ask in your questions using the QR code for Slido, and I'll try and get through as many as we can. So already, if we're talking about future benefits, naturally a conversation about personalisation arises. I'd like to ask the panel, what is causing this drive for greater personalisation, and how is it influencing benefit strategies? Kate, you mentioned that you love to talk about personalisation because it's about the personal. How is it influencing benefit strategies?
For us, because you start off in terms of why is it changing, and for me it's this: our lives are personal. We can change the way we dress, the way we look, the way we access information, every aspect, whether it's real or virtual. And benefits and work is just an extension for that. So in terms of, I think our employees, our people are demanding more, and I think us as an organisation, we ought to be stepping up to that. And it's not really acceptable to give someone a nice little generic, sort of quite a corporate, I tend to work for large organisations, but a very standard, out-of-the-box approach. It needs to be able to be adaptable so that it appeals to the individual. In terms of how it affects our strategy and our approach, comes down to communications, and the best way of getting across to people is in those discussions and conversations. But the communication can't be a bland email out to all. It needs to be how we talk, how we connect, how we absorb information outside of work, and it needs to be delivered in the same way.
Mm-hmm. And Michele, you were nodding along there.
Yeah, I mean, I fully aligned. I think one driver maybe of this change in the life in general, I think, is technological advances as well. And I think it's through the digitalization of our lives in general that I think just our expectations to personalization and personal relevance have skyrocketed. And I think is what we're seeing, right? We're seeing 90% of consumers expecting a personalized experience from a corporation, and 75% get frustrated if this is not happening. So I really think this is transferred into the workplace, and I think is, against that background, not surprising, although quite concerning. I think is in a study we've seen that only 1 in 5 employees would say that the benefits are aligned with what's truly relevant to them. So I think that's really something to work on. I also think communication plays a big part in it, but I do also see that technology, fortunately, is not only fueling these expectations. I think is also where a big potential lies in addressing the personalization and helping us be more personalized. I think is a lot coming from technology and the wealth of data that we have available, because I think we cannot personalize without having data and knowing what to personalize for. And I think also in that part we do see that employees are actually open to share their data, because I think that's a very often a concern. But I think as soon as they see a benefit for them, they're really open to share data. I mean, this is a study, a global one by Accenture, who really found that 90% of employees are open to share personal data if it helps improve their performance or well-being. And when we speak about benefits, it was 2 out of 3 that said they are open to share data if it leads to more tailored rewards or benefits. So I think for me, this is something that as an industry or profession, we really should embrace. And to the strategy of benefits, I truly think that technology and data will or should play a core part in any benefit strategy going forward.
So there's this increasing drive for personalisation, yet the study found that there's a real disconnect between employees actually thinking their benefits are personalised for them. Morag, how can we connect the dots there?
So I think it's really interesting. You know, we're here talking about generations, and there is this temptation to think that those in their early careers or their mid-careers or their late careers want something fundamentally different. But if I pick up on the points that Kate was making, the reality is that that's not necessarily the case. They often want the same things, but the drivers for wanting them are different. So, and actually the OECD published a report in 2023 about retaining talent at all ages. And what they found was that the reasons people had for switching jobs was the same for younger workers and older workers. More money, they felt undervalued, they wanted meaningful work. That was the same across the generations. But if I give you an example perhaps, so at Unilever, when we introduced UWork, which is a new model that helps people to work flexibly with the organisation, the trigger for that, for starting to think about that, was around how did we retain older workers who might want to work more flexibly, and how could we keep their skills and experience. But even before we launched, we started to think about, well, is it really just older workers who want flexibility? Do people want it for reasons of study, for travel, to be more entrepreneurial, to phase into retirement, whatever it might be? And that has been our experience. So the end result is flexibility, but people want it for different reasons. So I think one of the reasons that we had the success we've had with UWork, or Unilever's had with UWork, is around the personalisation of the communications. So using people's stories was something we did a lot of, to say, here's someone like you, and this is how they are getting value from this benefit, from this approach, by helping people see this is something that could work for me. That's one of the ways that we've done it. And you can do that in other ways, for healthcare, for example. So you can provide healthcare, but thinking about, does your healthcare offering have something for everyone? You know, whether that's mental health, whether that's fertility, which may be appropriate for a particular generation, or maybe it's menopause, or maybe it's chronic illness. So whatever it might be, is there something that cuts across generations?
And we asked at the start of this panel about the biggest challenge, and budget definitely came up as top. And we have a question here from an audience member asking, how do you offer personalisation without greatly increasing the cost? Does anyone want to brave it and answer that one? I'm sure you'd be a millionaire if you knew the total answer to that.
I don't think I can answer it, but I'm going to have a stab. So maybe to again use an example. So at Soundcloud, I said, you know, we're working with relatively limited resources, catering to very diverse needs. In terms of personalization, so we looked at our pay equity outcomes and action planning. This is going back to 2022, by the way. We looked at where the talent gaps were and where we wanted to feed into, and then we did our sort of benefits assessment. And fertility and family forming benefits came up. You know, we had a relatively young workforce. A lot of them were asking questions about that support It's a pretty common benefit over in the US, especially in the tech world. So it became sort of the answer in terms of at least a company's approach. Of course, not everyone needs fertility family forming benefits, but it felt like the right thing to do. So we put a budget diversion dedicated to that for 2022. We also decided we would introduce it across our entire workforce, not just the US. So we were one of the first companies to introduce it in London, in the EU. And so the communication then leapt off that. So using that as a driver to attract people, we held lunch and learn sessions. So while we didn't have the budget to go down the AI route of delivering bespoke benefit comms, we took the personalized approach in terms of having lots of smaller sessions in our different offices, trying to get diversity resource groups together. So we've got clouds of color, we've got queer clouders, making it bespoke within the smaller groups and trying to get the personal touch by getting our diverse sort of HR teams on the ground delivering those comms. A little bit more analog version, even more analog than this maybe. I used to work at Spire Healthcare about 10 years ago. That was a healthcare company, meaning a lot of folks were based in different hospitals. A lot of them who were on the ground didn't have any access to tech even. So we went like really old school. We had different avenues of advertising. We took it as an advertising campaign. Mm-hmm. We had posters that we put up in the toilets across all our hospitals, making sure we target everyone who passed there. We had cafeteria call-outs, reception call-outs, home screens, all of the basic stuff, but really trying to cater to everyone who might cross the workforce at the time.
Mm-hmm. And now the panel is about future benefits, and the issues with some benefits is maybe a employee doesn't think it's relevant to them now, but it will be in the future. So how can employers better engage younger generations with benefits that are critical to their longer working lives but not necessarily appropriate for them now? They don't see it as a reward, they don't see it as a benefit. For example, specialised health support or even pensions engagement. Michele, can I come to you first for that one?
Yes, of course. I think it's coming back a bit to a lot that has been said before, because I think is maybe less that it's not relevant. Maybe is more, it's relevant due to a different reason, and you need. I think is a lot coming down really to the communication and really linking how we communicate to the aspiration of that specific person. And I think pension, for example, you mentioned is a very interesting example, because we actually did a pilot with a much more, let's say, digital employee benefits platform in Spain, and we saw that the youngest generations were the ones most actively engaging with pensions content. And I think this also, then again, was very interesting to understand, because I think a lot of the messaging is actually targeted to more the older people, talking about when you retire and whatever, but maybe then we should also change the messages to that it speaks to the younger generation, or also link it to maybe about the investment and how they can link that for sustainable causes, or anything that's really much closer to them. Mm-hmm. But I personally do feel that the relevance, I think that's to each person to decide, so to speak, but very often the relevance is there, is more being relevant in why it is for this person.
Does anyone else want to go?
Just to add. So I think in terms of what Michele has said, I would agree, and I think pensions is the classic. How do you engage people who are not quite seeing it yet as a really relevant issue? I know if I talk to the 25-year-olds in my family and try to start a conversation about pensions, there would be eye rolling at the dinner table. So the way that we sort of have done some of it in Unilever was around, exactly as Michele was saying, about linking it to topics that are of more interest and more engaging. So we ran a programme that actually was targeting our older employees about your future working life. How do you need to think about the next steps in where you're going? But was open to all and was attended by all generations. And as part of that, talking about your purpose, what do you want to learn? How do you see your 50 or 60 career, 50 or 60 year long career, if you are starting out? And helping people to think then, okay, so if that's what you want and that's what you're aspiring to, how do you financially plan for that? What do you have to think about? So it's kind of connecting the thing that may be less interesting to the thing that's more interesting is a way of starting to deal with that.
And it's really interesting you mentioned about financial concerns, because that leads us nicely onto something that we're all aware of. The cost of living crisis has been going on for a number of years now, and to some extent there's always been financial concerns and a need for better financial well-being in the workplace. But Kate, what measures is Dentsu taking to support employees' financial well-being, and do you think the financial concerns of younger generations particularly differ from older generations?
Well, that's a good question. I think on the whole financial question, I think the absolutely fundamental starting point is we need to be paying fairly and competitively. And it doesn't matter what money we throw at benefits, if we haven't got the foundations right, it's, we're doing something wrong. I mean, Dentsu in the UK is the living wage employer, and we're really proud of that. And so that for us was our starting point. In terms of the support, just on the previous conversation, the other bit I was going to add in was around, because budgets are always tight for everybody, employee representation groups, and really using them to understand what people's needs are and not. Within financial awareness, we do a lot on education to make sure, which is the reason I've mentioned in ERGs is that the need to understand, well, we need to understand our people better. We can't make assumptions. We can't sit there and behind our laptops sort of trying to work it out. And so we do need to talk and understand people. And when we want to provide financial advice, the starting point comes back to, well, where are people getting this advice already?
Yeah.
And nowadays it's much broader, and before it was sort of talking to your friends and your family, and that window and accessibility is broadened. But with it comes the need to fact check, and is it right? So there is a level of responsibility there to make sure that we're providing accurate information. We do in the UK use Nudge. We do provide other financial education as well, but it's there in terms of making sure it's accessible. But a lot of it just feels like it's around having that conversation and talking about it and making sure that our people are there, people understand. But also, so we go. I'm going slightly off track, but we talk to our line managers as well to make sure that they understand the need to be able to we pick it up under sort of like your ability to manage and be aware of your employees' wellness, to understand that they're open and receptive to where the different forms of stress come from.
And do any of the other panellists think that they, from your own workforce, perhaps Soundcloud, that's on average a younger workforce, are those the financial concerns that are coming through, or the conversations different from other organisations you've worked at?
I think they're slightly different in the sense of the transparency. So again, we talked about, not generalising generational needs, but I think it's a culmination of, yes, Gen Z are more transparent. So I have conversations with, senior leadership saying, why are young engineers, talking so openly about their salaries? But it is different, and people are very comfortable doing that. Kate, you were talking about where people get their information from. I mean, TikTok, right? Pay Transparency Street and all of that is viral in TikTok. So I think there are those two aspects, along with the legislative push for transparency coming in as well, that people are sort of open to asking questions, which we, as employers and companies need to answer. In terms of your question, Joe, the concerns are slightly different. So we have more folks asking, will the company cover our student debt, for example? And then going back to the point around budgets, we cannot implement a new benefit every time 3 new people ask. But then, to Kate, your point about paying fairly and being competitive, can we offer them salaries? And appropriate salary increases? Can we do salary reviews every 6 months? Can we preempt sort of market competitive rates and make adjustments before people ask us for them? Which, every little bit more in the pocket kind of an approach.
Sorry, Michele.
Maybe one thing to add to it, because I think the channels where the information come from, I think is quite an important one, and I think where we really see a shift in the generations, because I do think, what we've seen is that really the concerns are not that different, but they're much heightened I think that the younger generations are much less confident about their financial future, and they have much more financial concerns. I think they're also more directly affected by the cost of living crisis. So I think it is even a more important topic. But then on top of that, they struggle to find trusted sources to get information. And I think it's the World Economic Forum that found that study that younger generations are 8 times more likely to get their financial advice from social media. And I think that's where I do see a core role for employers in really helping to build financial literacy and sustainable habits, and particularly in this world where on social media, what can you trust, what not. So I think that's a very important role. Also, I think considering that, interesting actually, the employer has emerged as the most trusted institution in today's world, which I found quite interesting. So before, and pretty global, before media, governments, NGOs, anything. So I think as an employer, one can have an impact. And I do also think is then, again, what we did, for example, on the pensions proposition, we also have Nudge embedded in it, but we, for example, added SOGO, which is another one, which is more targeted towards younger generation and more bite-sized learning, more gamification, because I think one element, I would also say the younger generation might be even extreme in terms of other generations, is the span of attention. I think it's decreased for all of us, but I think in the communication, they say it's 8 seconds. I think maybe that's a bit exaggerated, but I think it needs to be very bite-sized and small pieces of information and much more gamified, I think, in the way we communicate. I feel that's important.
Yeah, so there's a huge role for the employer, and that responsibility is increasing to almost tackle misinformation, because I've seen those TikToks and they're very concerning. Let's go to some audience questions. So, return to the physical office space, mandate or magnet. So is a simple mandate to attend the office enough, or should rewards be the driver to attract them? And if so, which rewards? Who wants to tackle that, Kate?
I think the whole, should you go back to the office, or should we, where you work.
Yeah.
So we vaguely talked about what do we do when you have no money, and what's the purpose of employee benefits. Benefits for me are they're an amplification of your company's culture. So the flexibility in where you work is also an employee benefit, and I think that's something which, and I know it's a deciding factor cross generations, whether you'll pick one job over another, in terms of whether you're Gen Z, got a 5-year-old child, which would be, it's not mutually exclusive, whether you're me or whether you've got a new puppy, that flexibility is important. So if the company's decided that we need people to be physically together so we can collaborate better and create better, or there is a physical need, how that becomes part of the culture. So for me, there needs to be a selling point. You need to say why are we doing this and what's the rationale for it. In terms of should there be a magnet? I was previously at another organisation where we did some great things to try and encourage people to come back into the office, because actually it was a mandate, they needed to be there, but we wanted to make it desirable. But I think, food is good. food is always good because of the cost of living. It's expensive. Yeah. You're having to come to the office, you've got to pay for your commute. So actually, if you get breakfast when you're there, that actually helps.
Yeah.
But there's got to be a reason. It's got to feel like there is a need to come in there, and you're getting a more productive, enjoyable, fun time at work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course.
I think this one is very sort of direct to what we actually did at Soundcloud, because, obviously being a music company, the pull, so food is good. We've added music to the mix, and that goes back to that point of culture as well. How can we bring people in? So we've done what we call connection first, and really leverage opportunities around music to getting people in. The other aspect, though, is how does that look like in terms of someone's performance? What about the impact on visibility? So are you going to then have teams that actually prefer mandated days in the work? And then what do you do with folks who can't come in, don't want to come in, are more productive at home being remote? So that performance management and the reward piece then also comes into play. As reward leaders, do we have policies in place that are going to safeguard folks and mitigate some of those biases as well?
Yeah, of course.
So I was going to add a slightly different perspective, which is my personal view is I don't think benefits are the way to get people back into the office. When I was at Unilever, we did some global survey of flexibility, and we had talked to our employees about return to the office and what we were looking for in terms of a return. And we were asking people about how did they feel positive about that expression that we wanted people back in the office 3 days a week, or how did they feel? And overwhelmingly the response was around, actually, I enjoy coming to the office. I want to come to the office to engage with people. I just don't want to be told. And I want to have the flexibility. And interestingly, I was talking to someone last night. They're 28. They've just been offered a new job yesterday, and I was asking them about what's the working arrangements in terms of flexibility or otherwise. And they said, it's perfect. It's 2 to 3 days a week at home. In the office, and the opposite in the workplace, and that works well because I want to go to the office, is what she said. So people do want to go on the whole. I know that's not everybody, but it's not the benefits I think that really take them there. It's the collaboration, it's being with colleagues, it's those things that take them there.
And perhaps it's looking at that as a benefit in itself. Yeah, it's not, and it's a free benefit. Well,
which is what we've done. It's part of our total rewards proposition.
Yes.
That no one's going to force you to come in.
Yeah. Insurers have got a bit of a hard time today, but maybe that's telling. Another question here: how do you cater benefits to different workforce needs while insurers providers are not quite there yet?
No, I think is a fair question, absolutely. But I think we're really making a very big effort, I think, to get there. I think it's on all fronts. I think we do a lot in terms of personalization. I think the first step that we've seen is you need to be able to connect with the ultimate employee. So I think in general, I think the whole industry from an insurance perspective, we were very much a B2B business. I think we very much have to become a B2B2E business and connect with the individual employee, which I think is a new skill for us to learn as well. But I think that's where I see the direction of travel going. I see digital solutions that complement the insurance, a very important part of it. I think what we have started to do in many countries already is basically, first of all, adding the digital piece around your insurance solution. You understand what do I have, everything that's linked to it I can do online or on the app, but then also complementing it with a broader voluntary or flex offering. And I think that's where the personalization also comes in. And I think it addresses also a bit the budget perspective, which we've seen is number one concern for everyone is, yes, the budget is limited. And we've actually seen, on the other hand, that many employees are actually willing to contribute to benefits out of their pocket because they get a better deal as well. So I think that's a nice way and a win-win-win solution, so to speak, where employers can offer more flexibility, more personalization, in the sense that employees choose their additional top-ups, they choose additional coverages, they get help, what is relevant for me, what do I need from a risk perspective, and they can offer this. The employee is being helped with from a cost of living crisis as well, because I think if we offer things through group contracts, I mean, it's many times cheaper than if an employee would need to go into the open market. So I think that's, from an insurance perspective, I think one first step how we're going there, and I see this increasing.
Perfect. Thank you. And we're very quickly running out of time, but I want to just go to one last question. If I can ask each of you to give me a quick fire answer on this one. So we'll start with Isha. What role will purpose play in your benefit strategy, particularly concerning the next generation of the workforce?
That's a good question. I think everything we do, right, from employee value proposition to like literally going out there and attracting talent and keeping them, the easier the tie between what the organization's purpose is and what your workforce, as on an individual level, but also collectively, what is it that unites both? So if you think of the Venn diagram of what you want as an employee and what the organization wants as an employee, you can leverage that in both ways, whether it's performance, whether it is meeting the expectations, but simply being authentic as well. So everything we've covered, if you take it back to that simple level of what is the right thing to do in a way that is meaningful to that organization specifically, I think it goes a long way in building trust at the very least, but also in then being able to tie everything together with it.
Thank you. I'll be brief. Values, I think, is more important than, well, is as important as purpose, and your benefits and how you work. This is how your values are manifest themselves, and how your cultures manifests. So I think that's absolutely critical. I think in terms of, I think we as a collective need to think broader in terms of what is a benefit. Why do people choose you over another organisation? And even without a budget, there's an awful lot that is unique and special about your organisation that we can amplify, and then we can really sort of talk about as being, this is a benefit for coming to me and not this other organisation.
Thank you. I agree, and I think purpose and having meaningful work, as we've talked about already, is not something that's unique to those early in their career. Everybody wants that. Having said that, Deloitte had a report that they issued this year about Gen Z, and it talked about, interesting work versus salary. And their report said, half of Gen Z would choose interesting work over salary at a moment in time. So I think it's ignore interesting work and ignore purpose at our peril. And again, for an audience of, I'm imagining largely reward colleagues, how often have you had the conversation where so-and-so is a flight risk, we need to give them more money, and how can we emphasise it? And it's about having those conversations that say, is it really the money in this case? Sometimes it will be, but actually is it something else, and how do you get more connected with your other colleagues to deliver what that individual needs?
Yeah, it's quite often a combination of factors.
Yeah, I mean, I would fully agree. I think we see that majority of people are looking for meaning through their work, actually. And I think it is more pronounced even with the next generation. I think we've seen that 9 out of 10 Gen Z are prepared to quit their job for a company that's more aligned with their values. So I personally do believe that purpose and values will play a much bigger role as we move into the future, and particularly from an employee benefits perspective as well, because I think we've seen more and more studies really emphasizing the link between a sense of meaning and purpose and belonging to retention and to productivity as well. So I do actually feel, if I would do a prediction for 2030, I personally feel that benefits will much more become a strategic driver of the overall employee experience, and are really centered around bringing to life and connecting employees with a company's purpose and values, and basically making it tangible through the benefits that are offered. So, yeah.
Perfect, thank you. Now, unfortunately, that is all we have time for. A huge round of applause for our fantastic panel.